Welcome into Carps Corner and free NFL free agency still surging along. I mean, you thought everything was going to be more or less done. And then all of a sudden, when Deshaun Watson throws a wrench in it and heads to Cleveland, there's still teams that need quarterbacks. You look at Indy, you look at Carolina, you look at the Saints, you look at the Panthers. And so they've got holes to fill. And so where are they going to go? They've got their own buckets that they obviously need to take care of. And so where are they ultimately going to go? Who do they go find? You had Jimmy Garoppolo still out there. Baker Mayfield still floating around in the abyss. You had guys like Jameis Winston, coming off an ACL surgery. You had Marcus Mariota. So where are all these guys going to land? What ultimately happens? And how does that impact the balance of power? And so the next big domino that we didn't even realize was able to fall was Matt Ryan. And I think people in Atlanta thought, okay, you're going to ride him out for the next 3 or 4 years, even though you're in kind of a rebuild. Maybe after next year, you'd move on from him. But at this point, it seemed like he was going to be your guy moving forward. And you get it. He's been there for a long time. Heck, I played against him in Atlanta. That's how you know it's been that long. Very, very talented player. 3rd overall pick. I mean, he's top 10 in some NFL passing categories already. He's been really, really good for the city of Atlanta and for the Falcons franchise. Won an MVP. He's led them to a Super Bowl, had a 28-3 lead in the Super Bowl as well. And so when you saw Atlanta interest in Deshaun Watson, you're thinking, okay, they can get a guy who might ultimately change their trajectory for the next 10 to 15 years. You can understand where they'd move on. It makes sense. You saw the Colts do it before with Peyton Manning when they could get Andrew Luck. It's like, all right, even though this guy has been great for you for a long time, nothing personal, you move on. So when the when the Falcons ultimately didn't land Watson, he goes to the Browns. Surprised then, because the Colts, they knew that they didn't have a chance to get Watson. They weren't trading him in the division. They were hoping he'd go to Atlanta so they could free up Matt Ryan. I guess Matt Ryan was still available. So you see the Indianapolis Colts make a very, very shrewd move. They go get Matt Ryan for a 3rd rounder. Now, Ryan's been really good, very consistent. Had someone tell me yesterday, social media, that Carson Wentz was a better quarterback last year than Matt Ryan. I'm not looking at a 1-year one-off, and I'm also watching film. Numbers aren't going to tell you everything. Matt Ryan has played big in big moments throughout his career, and the body of work is really, really strong. He may not have the splashy athleticism, and he may not have a cannon of an arm that can throw it 70 yards off of a knee, but he has a good arm. He makes good decisions. He has great pocket presence, and from all accounts has great intangibles and is a great leader. And so as we go through this now, once again, this is another top flightish quarterback, won an MVP, like that's indisputable, who is transferred from the AFC or from the NFC to the AFC. Saw Russell Wilson do it. But now let's look and let's run down the quarterbacks that are currently in the AFC. You have Josh Allen in Buffalo, doing a really stinking good job and has improved as much as anybody you're going to see over the first couple years, especially from a big guy, athletic, strong arm. He's become far more accurate. All right. You look at the AFC North, Deshaun Watson in Cleveland just got there, really talented. Year off, there may be some rust and he may be suspended a little bit, but very, very talented player and a good roster around him. Joe Burrow, I think we all know what he is. He just took a team to a Super Bowl in Cincinnati and has been a very, very talented piece. Then you have Lamar Jackson, who has won an MVP and was incredibly elite. Last year, the Ravens were decimated by COVID. Backfield on offense, defensive backfield on the other side of the ball. He had his own things. But let's not forget something, that he is one of the most dynamic players in the NFL with the ball in his hand. By the way, his contract's going to be up soon, and we'll see how that Deshaun Watson trade ultimately in the contract ultimately affect Lamar Jackson moving forward. You look at the AFC West, Derek Carr now teamed up with his college teammate Devontae Adams, Russell Wilson ultimately in Denver. I mean, very, very good quarterbacks. Justin Herbert sitting out there in San Diego. I mean, those are 3 really good guys. Oh, by the way, we got the cherry on the sundae now with Pat Mahomes. who was with Kansas City, Super Bowl champion, won an MVP, done a lot of great things. And so with all of this stuff happening and all the things transitioning there with the AFC, if you don't have a good quarterback, you're not going to be able to have success. You're going to be in a tough one. And so the Indianapolis Colts realized Carson Wentz wasn't the guy. They slid him out of there, got some draft capital coming back. Looks pretty good. So he goes to the Washington Commanders. And then they're able to replace him with Matt Ryan, who is a more consistent upgrade. Is this the Matt Ryan that he was probably, I don't know, 5-10 years ago? Probably not that guy. But here's the one thing you get when you're buying Matt Ryan. You're buying tremendous upside on the downside. Like, he has a very, very high floor. His upside, he might not be able to make this unbelievable plays that you see a Mahomes or a Wilson make, and even an Aaron Rodgers at this point. But he puts you in position to win. He's not going to turn the football over. And when you have a roster like the Colts, you got Pittman, really good receiver. They got to get more out of Paris Campbell. They've got Jonathan Taylor, one of the best running backs in the NFL. They've got a tremendous offensive line that will be able to protect Matt Ryan, because he doesn't move as well as he used to. And that's a function of age, and you ultimately get that. So that's a big deal. But you have, some receivers. They'll continue to upgrade that. You have the offensive line. You have the 9th ranked scoring defense in the NFL, and you're in the weakest division probably in your conference. Sure, Tennessee was the number 1 seed overall. I get that. Derrick Henry, really good. Ryan Tannehill, he's serviceable. He's a good quarterback. But I don't think anybody's lining up of all those quarterbacks I mentioned to put Ryan Tannehill ahead of any of them. He's not going to be up there. Jacksonville, you have Trevor Lawrence. Maybe he ends up being really good, but they're still in the building process. They gave him some weapons, but it's not like he's a seasoned vet. In Houston, they're still in a rebuild. They just traded away Deshaun Watson. And so the Colts, for my money, they're the favorite to win the South right now. That's where I'd be going. They just needed a guy who would be consistent. Carson Wentz didn't have that. Phillip Rivers gave you some of that upside. He'd still, throw a ball every now and then that would leave you scratching your head. He had all the intangibles with leadership and everything that Carson didn't have. Matt Ryan, by all accounts, is going to bring those intangibles with you. He's going to raise the floor of the Indianapolis Colts and the quarterback play that's going to be there. And he's still going to be able to make the plays you need him to make with the talent around him. I like the Colts. Gosh, I wish I could say they're, a team that you could throw in the Super Bowl mix. And maybe they are. The problem is there's probably about 7 or 8. The AFC is incredibly crowded. And so while they have the weapons, they went out and got a guy who's really talented and, is very seasoned and very experienced. That's a key. It's a big piece for Matt Ryan. The fact that he's experienced and he's not going to throw games away, because this is a Colts team that's looking to get over the hump. They're looking to get into the playoffs and get over the hump. And Matt Ryan's the guy that I think could do it for him. He checks all of those boxes and does it in a very impressive way. And Colts did it for a 3rd round pick. And I really think this is kind of Atlanta doing Matt Ryan a solid. They knew that they were in a rebuild. Arthur Blank, I think, has a tremendous amount of respect for Matt Ryan and everything that he's done. They look around, they see their roster, and they think we can't compete with Tampa Bay at this point. Green Bay is better than we are. Not who knows what's going on with New Orleans, Jameis Winston, Carolina. We can't win our division. And even if we could get close to it as a wild card, there's a couple other teams that are clearly better than us. We're trying to get younger and retool this thing on the move. So you understand, they did him a solid. They got some compensation back. Probably could have got more if they would have really pushed this earlier. I think there have been a lot of teams who would have loved to have had Matt Ryan if they felt they were close to get over the hump, because Matt Ryan can do that for you, and he's not going to lose you games. And in fact, he will ultimately win you some as well. It's not the Matt Ryan he was, like I said, 5 to 7 years ago, but he's still one heck of a player. Other quarterback news. Marcus Mariota taking his talents to Atlanta to replace Matt Ryan. And so you look at this 2-year deal, he's getting, really good backup money, not really starter money. And this is smart for the Falcons. Maybe they draft a guy this year, but they have Mariota, who's athletic, who can move around, who can buy time, who can make some plays with his feet, get the fans excited, and keep them in some games. Not the best quarterback in the NFL, but I think that he could have a little bit of a resurgence. Sometimes you start for a while like he did in Tennessee. You take a step back. You go to another organization like the Raiders. You play a little bit sparingly as a change of pace quarterback to Derek Carr. I think this could be a good situation for him. Ultimately, he's going to be a stopgap, a bridge guy for the Falcons as they try to find their quarterback of the future. The problem is, I don't know if anyone really loves any of these quarterbacks in the draft. And so he checks a lot of boxes for you for the Falcons to be able to make the offense functional as you're going through this retooling, this redevelopment, and trying to identify what you're ultimately going to be moving forward. Because that's where the Falcons are at this point in the NFC South. And it's a shame because the NFC is a much more winnable division. Granted, like I said, Green Bay is good. San Francisco is probably going to be good. Tampa Bay with Tom back, they're all going to be pretty darn good. Dallas, we'll see them with Dak, but it's not like it's the AFC where you have a glut of elite quarterbacks that are sitting there. So it leads us to another team in the NFC South. Jameis Winston re-signing with the Saints. 2-year deal, $28 million. You know, not really starter money, great backup money, 21 guaranteed. I think the Saints are going to be looking to replace him ultimately in the draft. They can find another guy, but you know, when they couldn't get Deshaun Watson, it's like, what do? You have to have somebody play quarterback for you. The problem is with the Saints is that they have a roster that's designed to win now. And as I talked about Matt Ryan, who's a guy who has a really, really high floor, and his ceiling may not be the most elite in the world anymore, but he's not going to lose you games. You know, Jameis Winston over the course of his career has shown you that he can be a 30-30 guy, 30 touchdowns, 30 picks. Now, we hoped that Sean Payton had kind of groomed that out of him. But unfortunately, Sean Payton is no longer there. I don't know if he'll be around, you know, if he's changed him enough to have that completely out of him. And he's not going to be there to design the offense to really utilize the best things of Jameis Winston's game. And you saw him struggle at points this year. So the Saints, I mean, like I said, while the NFC has a chance to really be had, they've got a roster and no quarterback. And unfortunately for them, there's no way the Falcons were going to trade Matt Ryan within the division, maybe within the conference, but not to another NFC South foe. And so they've got to make do with Jameis Winston. And that's ultimately where they're going to be. Now, the big story here is Baker Mayfield. And this is the story with Baker Mayfield. Sometimes when you get what you want, it's not actually what you need. And you got to be careful what you wish for. And that's ultimately what happened with Baker Mayfield. He understood that basically after reading the tea leaves and doing some research that, you know, both sides knew that this wasn't going to work this offseason. You know, he's going into the final year. They guaranteed his 5th year before that. Probably kind of regretted it a little bit ultimately, but you know, you felt like you probably had to do that for your number 1 overall pick in your starting quarterback. So you guarantee him his $19 million. Playing through a shoulder injury. He's doing it because he wants to go out there and win. He wants to get a new contract, show how tough he is. Like, all of those things are true about Baker, and all of them are really great qualities. Problem is he didn't play well. And he looked shockingly different than he did in 2020. Missed a lot of open guys. They had a roster that was ready to win now. And I think, you know, he started getting a little too chippy. They wanted an adult at quarterback. He was responding to everything. And I think he let a little bit of his bravado impact the way that he ultimately played football. And so he wanted out of Cleveland. And he posts on social media, you know, his non-goodbye letter about how him and his wife grateful to the city of Cleveland. And believe me, Cleveland fans, most of them loved Baker Mayfield because they loved what he stood for. He's the tough guy, the underdog, the walk-on who made it big, who's always going to beat his chest for you. And they're going to play with that bravado and not be ashamed to be a quarterback of the Cleveland Browns. And he was your first round pick, your number 1 overall pick. He was your guy. He was your guy. So he endeared himself to the fans of Cleveland. So I know a lot of them were sorry to see him go. And I ultimately don't think that he really wanted to go. But he knew it was an untenable situation. The Browns understood the same. And I think Baker overplayed his hand. I think in his mind, and this is what makes him so confident, that he believes he's a little bit better than probably what his abilities are. And I think Baker can be a good NFL quarterback. I think he has what it takes. Last year, he was injury plagued, but I think he views himself more like Pat Mahomes. And I don't think his skill set is quite to that level. And so he thought he'd get out of there and there'd be this robust trade market for him. Well, if the Texans wanted him, they would have thrown him in the package in the trade. The Colts traded for Matt Ryan. So they're out. That was his preferred destination outside once Deshaun was brought in. It was evident that's where he wanted to ultimately go. The Falcons, they just signed Mariota, so they don't necessarily want him. The Saints, they just signed Winston, so I can't imagine them bringing him in and bringing him on. And the Panthers are kind of sitting out there thinking that that's a possibility. But apparently he has interest in the Panthers, and why shouldn't he? It's really the last open seat. It's the last open chair. But ultimately, I don't think that interest is reciprocated. I don't think that they are truly interested in Baker. I think there might be some people, but they've got to get this right down there. And probably going to end up looking with the draft, rolling with Sam Darnold. But I just don't think the interest was there. So Baker overplayed his hand. When you force yourself out, you have to understand that there may not be a place for you to go. Doesn't look like Seattle's interested in him either. And so I'm not sure where Baker's going to go. He may have to go to one of those teams I mentioned, the Falcons or the Saints. My goodness, and try to battle. I don't know if you go to Philadelphia, like a place that, you have a quarterback situation that might be a little bit up in the air, and try to go there and battle and win a starting job. Texans, if they would have wanted him, they would have probably thrown him in the deal. They're probably looking on to the future. And so Baker, I love the guy. I love everything he stands for and how he plays, but I just don't think that there's really any market for him at this point. Some Rams news for you. Just sit here and look at the Los Angeles Rams. Les Snead, their GM. I mean, he's trying to find a way to package all these picks together or all these players together and keep everything working. Working on Aaron Donald, best defensive player in the NFL, signed a 6-year deal back in 2018. It looked really great at the time, but if you look at what guys are getting now, Von Miller getting $120 million over 6 years from Buffalo, and there'll be some structure issues with that, and he's probably not going to see all that, but my goodness, I mean, that's a heck of a deal to be able to get, especially a guy who's a little bit older. Aaron Donald, he's going to probably be in line for that. And they're trying to craft what Les Snead calls a win-win situation for both. Give him some more money, push some more dollars out, because they're still in the win now mode. They brought in Allen Robinson. They have Matt Stafford. You got Allen Robinson on a 3-year, $46 million deal. You want to keep that defensive line pretty strong. Cooper Kupp, Allen Robinson, and you're ready to fly. The other issue is apparently Odell Beckham Jr. kind of wants to return there. He wants to be an LA guy. Well, when you bring in Allen Robinson, that's going to muddy the waters a lot. You got Cooper Kupp already. It's not like the Rams just have a full-on empty pocket of cap space so they can jam some stuff in there. It's full. They don't have a lot of room, especially not for what you would kind of consider your third receiver who's coming off, major ACL at the end of the season. And so the odds of him being ready for the start of the year, very, very slim. And so this is going to be a little tough for OBJ, trying to find a home, and he'll probably have to do a 1-year prove-it deal that's team-friendly if he wants to stay with the Rams. But if you look at the rapport that him and Matt Stafford had last year, how they were able to get that going before his injury, he looked really stinking good. And so maybe he does that 1-year deal with the Rams. You're over there with Allen Robinson and Cooper Kupp. My goodness, they all may have 1,000 yards. If they can block it up at all, it'll be a great situation for Matt Stafford and everything that's out there. Big, big news for the Rams. And lastly, got Ohio State Pro Day Wednesday. You have CJ Stroud throwing to Olave and Garrett. And I love this for college quarterbacks. When you have elite receivers and you don't have a quarterback in your draft class, you get to go out there on pro day and sling the ball around. Ryan Day's a big fan of it because it allows you to settle in. You get the experience of it. If you have some jitters, it's fine. They can't draft you anyway. And so it all works and it's all well and good, for that young quarterback. So CJ Stroud going to get that opportunity. I think it'll be great for him, to be able to go out there with two guys he's really familiar with, two possible, potentially probable first rounders in Olave and Garrett. Tons of NFL scouts are going to be there, and he'll be able to put a nice little seed in their mind potentially for what's coming down the pike with him next year. That's it. Just a quick Carps Corner here today. Appreciate you all listening. We're going to continue to crank this stuff out leading in and more news coming your way. Thanks.